And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. For whom He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, so that He would be the firstborn among many brethren. This is one of the most important passages in all the Bible with regard to marriage. You're sitting there going, what? For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to become conformed to the image of His Son. What is the purpose of marriage? A lot of Christian books, even sincere ones, have it very wrong. The purpose of marriage is not to create a little heaven on earth. It's not to fill your life with bliss. It's not to meet all your needs. If I meet all my wife's needs, it's idolatry. If she meets all my needs, it's idolatry. My wife was not created to meet all my needs, and I was not created to meet hers. We can't. That's why marriages fall apart. You expect your spouse to do something they were never intended to do. Christ is to meet my wife's needs. Only He can do that. And only Christ can meet mine. Now, what is the purpose of marriage? The purpose of marriage is that through marriage, I might become, and my wife might become, conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. That's the purpose of marriage. And if you get this, it will make your marriage so strong. Now, I have been called by God into the ministry to preach. I have been called to preach. And you know, you might not say that this much here in this country, but in my country they always say things like, yep, he was called to preach. He turned his back away from his calling and God killed him. You know, if God calls you to preach and you don't preach, God will kill you. Well, I don't know. I know if you're out of God's will, you will get disciplined, but I'm not so sure God delights so much in killing people. But there is a sense in which I have been called, and that calling is irrevocable. It's not based upon me. I didn't make the decision. God called me into the ministry. Now, if it goes good in the ministry, wonderful. If it goes terrible, I'm not going anywhere. Why? Because I didn't get into the ministry for the sake of the ministry or for some benefit to myself. I got into the ministry because God called me to go into the ministry. Now, a young man will come into my office and he's got that look, you know. And I say, what's up? I'm in love. You're in love? Yeah. With who? With so-and-so. Well, and? Oh, I want to marry her. Well, why? Sit down. Well, I want to marry her because she's beautiful, and when we're together, I just feel wonderful, and we can talk, and we just do things together, and I just feel like, man, she completes me. I have a big stick that I use, and I have it behind my chair that when they say that, I just slap them in the head with it. Wake them up a little bit. And I say, now, okay, now let me see if I'm following you, if I'm understanding what you're saying. You want to marry this girl because she meets all your selfish, self-centered desires. No, that's not what I mean. But young man, that's exactly what you just said. You want to marry her because she's beautiful. What happens when she's not beautiful anymore, or when someone else comes along that's more beautiful than she is? What are you going to do? You want to be with her and marry her because you can talk to her. What happens when you can talk to your secretary a lot easier than you can talk with your wife? Because that's going to happen too. So what are you telling me? Do you see the problem? That's why people come together in secular societies. Do you realize that? It's all out of selfish, self-centered desires, and that's why their relationships fall apart. Do you see that? But if you're a secular culture, you have no other reason to come together unless it's for the benefit of the state. I mean, why do you come together? You're not supposed to be like. You think being a radical Christian is because you can stand on a park bench and preach? This is radical Christianity. When you say, I'm going to bind myself to a person for life, whether I get any benefit out of it or not because God's called me to do so. Now, why am I married to Charo Casado de Washer? My wife is from Peru. Why am I married to her? Well, you want the rock-solid basis for it? Now, this isn't all my marriage, but this is the foundation of it. I am married to her because in the same way that God called me into the ministry, and that calling is irrevocable, I believe that God has called me to lay down my life for this woman. To lay down my life in service to his daughter. That's why I'm married. You say, well, that's not very romantic. I didn't say that was my marriage. I said that was the foundation of it. Now, look at this. My wife is beautiful. She's a little flashy because she's Latin. She's beautiful. Now, let's say that some sort of chemical imbalance throws off her whole life and she's not beautiful anymore. Or let's say that she's in a car accident and she's crippled. I'm not going anywhere. Why? Because I didn't marry her because she's beautiful. I married her because of an irrevocable calling on my life to lay down my life for a daughter of God. Do you see that? Do you see that? So what happens if in our relationship we can't talk that much? You know, you pass through those times where it just seems like you're not communicating. I'm not going anywhere because I didn't marry her for that. I married her because God called me. So see, my entire marriage, I don't answer to my wife necessarily. I answer to Him. It doesn't. See, I can argue with her and say, well, you know, I'm not going to love you as Christ loved the church because you don't respect me as Christ tells you to respect me. Well, you don't do that either, so when you start doing it, I'll start doing it. See, I can't do that because it's just, God says, both of you, shut up. I commanded you to lay down your life for her, whether or not she respects you, appreciates it, or corresponds accordingly. You obey me. See, I'm trapped now. I mean, God's got me trapped here. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I want to do except obey Him more. So you see, our marriage is founded upon this. Now, let's look at something else. You know these dating services on the internet? Find the person that's compatible to you. Okay? That's kind of scary. Find the person that's compatible to you. Okay. It's not of God. It's not of God. You say, why? Because God usually doesn't do that. I mean, I guess He can, but it's very rare. I want to marry a woman who just loves all the stuff I love. You want to marry a woman who loves all the stuff you love so that she'll do everything you want to do, you selfish person. God, for the most part, is going to give you a wife or give you a husband that is not compatible to you. And you go, oh man, then maybe I was supposed to marry him. But see, the world tells you just the opposite, don't they? They tell you just the opposite. Why? Because everything the world's going to tell you is selfish and self-centered. They tell